Hey, my name's Evan and I'm a freelance videographer based out of Arizona. And I think every channel kind of deserves a good camera rigging video. For me, I really wanted to show what two cameras I use day in, day out, and how I've rigged them up to work for me. Now, that's kind of a disclaimer I need to make. These are camera bodies I purchased and rigged out over time to suit my needs for the type of work that I'm doing. I could definitely change the camera bodies tomorrow. I could change the lenses and everything else about them tomorrow, and that's something that I've always considered. But definitely don't take this as you need to do it this way. This is not a video where I'm saying I'm doing it the right way universally. I'm just doing it the way that seems to work really well for me in my workflow. All that to say, this is one of two cameras, and this is going to be the smaller, more simplified rig video for this camera, and then I'll swap out the cameras here on the tripod and show you the one that's a little bit more decked out with all the things. But at the very core of my cameras, I went with the Blackmagic 6K Pro. My checklist was pretty short. At the time of getting into the Blackmagic ecosystem, I really need unlimited record time, and I was using the A7 III, and that had 8-bit color, no ND filters, 30-minute record time, and it just wasn't the right camera for me anymore. So I ended up getting the Blackmagic 4Ks. Those are the pocket cameras with a micro four thirds mount and sensor. And it was a great solution at the time. It got me out of the realm of record time limits, and it gave me a full-size HDMI, and it gave me mini XLR ports and a lot of things that at the time were considered an upgrade. Moving on to the 6K Pros, which is what this is, I really was looking for something that had internal NDs. Now, in the ecosystem of Blackmagic, which at the time I was in and still am, that to me was a huge upgrade. Now I've got the Canon EF mount, Super 35 sensor. I can shoot in B-RAW for my own projects, ProRes if a client needs a direct delivery method, and it just gave me everything that I was really after, including those internal ND filters. And yes, at this point in my career, it is absolutely a luxury and borderline mandatory feature for any camera I pick up. I'm not against external filtration, but if you don't have to, then why bother? So that is the camera body, and I know a lot of people give it flack for the body style. It's got this weird design to it, I guess. But for me, I really like it. And when you look at cameras like Sony FX6 or even the Canon, the R5C Mark II or the C70, a lot of those get used with handles. So people will add a handle out to the right or use that Sony one with the FX6 on the right side of the body. And yeah, maybe it's a little bit different. It's lower, higher. You can kind of put it in different areas. But the grip on this camera body, I don't think is too out of place. So I don't have a gripe with the body style of the pocket cameras. I very much like how this camera feels in the hands to me. So maybe I'm weird, but I'm okay with it. It also has this nice 5-inch touchscreen on it with a great menu system. I don't think anybody can argue that Blackmagic's simplified menu system is very hard to beat. It's super easy to use. So that's what we've got going on here. Surrounding the camera, I've got a cage by Neatsy. Doesn't really matter. It's just a cage. I don't like using cages, but they're kind of a necessity at this point. Most of my cameras that I've owned in the past, and of course these, need some type of rigging. And by default, the camera just doesn't have enough mounting points, or it doesn't have everything like built into a handle like the Sony FX lineup does, or the new Canon C400. So because this doesn't have like one of those cool handles with, things built in, I do need a cage. And the purpose of the cage is, yes, to potentially protect the camera, but also to give me all these quarter and was it 3/8 mounting options around the camera so I can mount things to it. So this is so far just camera, cage. Of course, there's lens. I'm not going to talk about the lens in the matte box. That's just kind of a standard thing that a lot of cameras have. That's pretty much it for kind of the main core of it. Now, the pocket cameras don't have great battery life. And so like any camera that doesn't have great battery life, most of the pocket cameras, and my other one does this as well, most of the pocket cameras I see, they will run 15mm rods, and they will have them stick out of the back a little bit and then use a V-mount plate solution. Again, my other camera, which I'll show you, does this. But everybody has V-mount batteries on the back. I put mine for this camera on the side. So how I did this was I just took a small rig V-mount plate and I bolted it to the cage on the side. It had a couple quarter 20 areas, and I used 2 of them so that it wouldn't swivel. And this has been working great. What I like about this is 2 things. One, it does not block the screen, so it doesn't limit any sort of usage there. But then also it kind of balances the camera. The camera is naturally a little bit heavy on that right-handed side. So by putting a small V-mount, if I put like a bigger one, it's gonna, give me the opposite problem. But by putting a smaller 99 watt, like mini type V-mount on the left-hand side, on an easy rig or anything else where you're just kind of hanging it off a string and seeing if it tilts, crazy to one side. Funny enough, this actually balances almost perfectly straight. So putting a V-mount on the side was a great little thing to find out. So anyways, that's that. And then I'm just using a Condor blue cable, routing it around into the power port. And then I don't have a battery in the battery slot, but the battery slot is not empty. So what I do have is a product that I actually made. I'm not going to show too much detail on this video. I will talk more about it, but this looks like a battery. It is not. And like I said, in another video, I will share what it really is and how it benefits me. So, but it's not super crucial to the camera and the functions. Behind the battery, next to all these other inputs and outputs, is a Condor blue cage encapsulating a DD-TC1. So the DD-TC1 is a timecode box. For my workflow, having timecode, if you're unfamiliar, definitely do some research. Having timecode for using multiple cameras and multiple audio sources is a must. Whether or not I'm doing the edit doesn't really matter. It just makes the editing job, the editing workflow, so much cleaner and faster. And I have that feeding into the 3.5mm jack because the Blackmagic cameras actually know how to natively ingest timecode. So you don't have to hear timecode on the video track. Instead, it just puts it in the metadata in the file. And so that's just a nice little feature of the camera. And that's pretty much it. So it is just camera, cage, external battery, timecode generator, throw your lens on there and you're off to the races. So this is my more basic setup. Oftentimes this is going to be my B cam. And then I'm going to go ahead and swap this thing out for what I consider to be my A camera, the one that I'm using most of the time. Okay, so now I have what many might think is a monstrosity, a terrible rig. It looks super messy. And I need to admit something. On camera, this camera looks really, really messy. In person, I know that I did a really good job routing cables, keeping it as clean as possible, and being minimal, but also having some quality of life things on it. So believe me when I say that this could look way worse because I do have a lot mounted to it, but in person, it just doesn't look as bad as when I look at it on the screen. So take my word for it. I don't know. Maybe now is a really quick and good time to mention that my channel is very direct, behind the scenes stuff. I don't do a ton of selling and clickbaity stuff. So maybe consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel. It really helps out as we try to grow. Okay, so yet again, I'm not going to go over it, but the Blackmagic 6K Pro is the star of this camera as well. I do like having my two cameras that I own match perfectly, but it's not necessary. I'm totally cool to run a Red or a Nikon or a Sony or a Canon. I don't really care. But for me, I do like to use both cameras. I do like both cameras, excuse me, to be matching. It does make things a little bit easier, especially if I'm the one kind of controlling the whole project start to finish. So 6K Pro, same cage, same battery and battery plate. A lot of things are the same. Here's what's different. This camera is using a 15mm rod base, and we're still using a Manfrotto base plate or tripod plate. And I am doing what I mentioned earlier, which is I had the battery off to the back. Now this is kind of a swivelly type deal, right? So I can move this out of the way and still get to the screen and access it, things like that. I do have kind of too much cable here, so maybe I could reduce the cable length, swap that out with a different one, and tidy it up just a little bit more. But that's what we've got going on here, so I could still access the screen. This battery goes to a D-tap splitter because I wanted to power both the camera as well as the monitor that I have on top. This monitor is not a necessity. This is one of those nice to have type things, but let's go over it. So on top of the cage, I have a cheese plate. And on top of the cheese plate, I have a Condor Blue mini lock with a quick release that is part of my EasyRig Flycam type system. So if you're not familiar with EasyRig or Flycam, they are just basically backpacks that help lift the load off of your arms and displace it to your hips. And so having this mount on top gives me a quick release point where I can just lower that cable on top of the camera. It snaps, locks into place, and then my camera is attached to that system and I'm kind of ready to go. So that's what's going on top of here. Also on the cheese plate is, on the underside, is a NATO rail to 15mm rod adapter. And that goes to another 15mm rod adapter with NATO rail. And then that goes to a NATO rail connector or whatever it is, or clamp. And that's holding my microphone. It doesn't really matter what microphone you're using, but I went with something that was short. And at the time, the one that I went with was the DD S-Mic 2S. When I have this in the backpack, it looks like this. Everything's kind of folded together as streamlined as I can really make it. But this is not clamped down super tight, so that way I can just move that out of the way. And now it's in the position that I run it with. When I'm trying to pack this away, it just swivels back, done and done. Swivel it out, good to go. This works really well for me. It keeps me fast, it keeps me efficient on set. When I arrive, it's not like I have to put a bunch of things together, and that was kind of my goal, is just to be efficient as possible. So that's what we've got going on here with a little carbon fiber style 15mm rod. Next to the microphone, we have a Hollyland Mars M1 monitor. And this is on like a swivel tilt kind of mount. This plays an important role. It is not a necessary item. This is a luxury. I don't think that I really need it, but let me explain how I use it and you might agree that it's a good thing to have. Not only does it allow me to not have to look down at this camera. When this camera is at my chest, my neck is always kind of straining down. I'm always looking down. This gives the this lifts up the image so that I can look a little bit higher and I have better posture. So that's kind of the main reason why I wanted a top-mounted monitor on this camera. The other thing it allows me to do is, if this is on a tripod and we're doing some interviews, if I'm off to the side or somebody else is off to the side, I can adjust this monitor so that it's looking at me or the director, or it's showing the talent what they look like. So there's a lot of use cases for having a monitor on top of the camera like this. that is just kind of a quality of life thing. The other thing, the reason why I went with the Mars M1 is I wanted a 5-inch monitor, not a 7-inch on this one. I might swap that out. I might change my mind there. But this monitor can transmit and receive a wireless video signal. Why is that important? Well, in some circumstances, transmitting from this to a director's monitor is something that's being requested, or it would add value to that production. In rare circumstances, but this has happened before, I put a transmitter on my other camera and then I feed it to this one. So that way from one camera, I can look at this monitor and go, okay, I see what this camera sees. And I can glance up and I can go, oh, that's what my B camera sees. And I'm watching literally both from this one tripod, right? This one vantage point. I think that adds some value. There's a lot of versatility in a monitor like this. I think Hollyland just came out with something called the Pyro 7 or Pyro. I'm not 100% sure on that. And it looks to be a more advanced 7-inch version of this, and it works off of a new lineup that they have coming out. So that's something that if you're looking at this, maybe skip the M1 and go to the Pyro series. But if a 5-inch monitor with these capabilities sounds good, then I've had a great experience with this monitor so far. And that's what I've got going on here. Again, lens, matte box, I'm not going to go over that because sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not, and I use different configurations. So let's look at the other side. I promise I tried to do some cable management, and I think I did it really well. But, you know, I'll let you guys flame me in the comments if I failed on this pretty hard. I think the first thing that's a very standout feature is this handle poking out, right? This is made by Shape, and Shape has a patent, and there's some ways around the patent. I've seen some other products that do, you know, the same function, but they have a patent on this push button. So push, and you can now adjust this handle, right? So the position of the handle, and you can do it here or you can do it here. And it's incredible. I mean, having the ability to quickly move this into like a shoulder rig type position is great. I very rarely run this in a shoulder rig position, but or configuration, but if I wanted to, I can quickly do that. But I got this thinking, I'm probably going to return this handle. It's a couple $100. I can find them less expensive elsewhere. But this handle was able to kind of get exactly where I wanted it to be. And that was important. Holding this camera, I like to hold it like a turret gun out of a helicopter, just to feel cool, mainly. But it's a very comfortable hand position for me. And this allows me to get this exactly there. And if I need to move this out of the way to access the I/O ports over here, the timecode generator, whatever, I can do that. So kudos to Shape for having such a cool product. I do think it's a little bit overpriced, but still worth it if you've got the extra cash laying around to have something like this. So I'll move that out of the way so that, I'll move that out of the way so that we can take a look at everything else going on. So we've got another Deity TC1 timecode box. This time, instead of over here, it's mounted more towards the front. And that was just, you know, more of a convenience on where I wanted to mount everything. And so same setup where it's got a Condor Blue cage and it's locked into a mini lock also from Condor Blue. I have another cheese plate here, but this doesn't really serve a function outside of protection. So this is like an extension of the cage. I have another mini lock by Condor Blue, and that allows me to unlock this cheese plate and gain access to everything here. But if you notice, Blackmagic has a lot of this stuff exposed on these pocket cameras, at least. So the time code goes into this 3.5 millimeter jack. The monitor needs this HDMI. The shotgun or boom microphone, whatever it is, the shotgun microphone needs the mini XLR, and of course the V mount is going into power here. These are a lot of very important ports, and if these cables were to accidentally get bumped, or while it's sitting in the bag somehow it has too much pressure applied to any of these cables, it could break the cable, which is annoying, but it could break the port, which is a much bigger deal. So I thought of this. I didn't learn this from anybody, but I thought, you know what? If I could somehow protect this, I thought of 3D printing some sort of a cover. And in that same thought process of, okay, I'll 3D print a cover, I looked in my drawer and I had this cheese plate sitting around and I was like, man, can I somehow get this in front of it? And so sure enough, this is how I do it. And it's great because it protects all of these cables really well. And it's very easy to remove so I can gain access to them if I need to. Now with this cheese plate off, take a quick look. I also have these Condor Blue Mondo ties. This was an unnecessary splurge. They were doing some sort of Willy Wonka themed. Gosh, it reminded me of The Office when Michael pretends he's Willy Wonka and puts too many coupons in one particular bundle of paper. But they were doing Condor Blue was doing a Willy Wonka golden Mondo tie giveaway. And I was like, I don't need these. I can 3D print or I can just use some Velcro to do some cable management. But I bought these. I didn't win. Come on, Condor Blue. I didn't win, but I'm obviously not going to return them. I'm going to go ahead and put them to use. So I'm routing the power cable and everything for the monitor through this top side, and then they come down and into the port, or they continue through this Mondo tie to the D-tap. Power goes to that one to D-tap. So I think it's a pretty clean way overall of having all the cables managed. And again, on camera, this doesn't look like it, but to me, I think it's pretty well managed. And that is this camera. Now this camera does a lot, and it does that because over time I learned what I need it to do. And the 6K Pro camera, I'm not going to tell you to go run out and buy it because I think there's some fantastic cameras on the market. If you're in Sony, get an FX3, get an FX6. If you run Canon, the R5C is amazing. The C70 is amazing with their sensor there. The new C400, if you've got $8,000 to spend, is a great camera. There's a lot of great cameras out there from different manufacturers. I went with this because this was kind of like my ladder, my stepping stone. And every time a new camera came out with features that maybe I didn't need this V-mount anymore. If I buy that camera, it's got good battery life and I'm not losing anything else. You know, like I think the FX6 is a good example. That has a great electronic ND and hard stop NDs in there as well. And that's a great camera. A lot of people use it. But when I thought about getting the FX6, I thought, do I really need it? Do I need to be in that ecosystem and sell all my, glass and things like that? And the answer was no. My solution is, okay, add a V-mount. Now this thing has the features that I need. There's other ones that have a great, built-in XLR into the handle. And so I thought, oh man, wouldn't it be nice to have that? Okay, well, I can just rig this camera up to essentially have a great XLR shotgun microphone mount as well. These other ones have great external monitors that are sold with. I don't have a good example of that. I'm just saying there's some cameras that do have good external monitors. Well, why not just get something from Hollyland or another company where I like the features and the image quality out of that monitor and make it work? So my point is, if there's like a lesson to be learned, aside from just learning how I have my camera set up, if there's a lesson somewhere hidden in this video, it's that no matter the camera that you do have, you could probably get more out of it by rigging it up. And if you already have it rigged up and you've kind of exceeded its capabilities and you've outgrown it and you don't, that's the one thing really holding you back, then by all means, go get that next camera, the one that's going to solve those problems. But I'm holding on to these guys for now until something rolls out that, maybe is just a better version of this, and it's gonna make me need to upgrade. But I have not seen that, I have seen cameras that I would love to have, but I haven't seen one that is so compelling to make me spend that kind of money and effort learning maybe a new system if I step away from Blackmagic, or just learning a whole new layout and becoming efficient with that. Because one of the biggest values I've been able to afford my clients who do hire me on is I know my equipment extremely well. I could almost be blindfolded and I know all of the button layouts and where things are and how to configure it. But I think more importantly, I'm efficient so I can be fast. And I think, you know, a lot of people say time is money. Well, if I could save you time by not fumbling around with my camera gear and going, man, it's doing something weird. I have no idea. What is this setting? I can't find it in the menu system and all this stuff. That doesn't happen to me. It doesn't happen to my sets. And so that is a value add, is I've stuck with a camera body that I have learned top to bottom, and the menu system I've learned top to bottom. And I'm just so good with this camera, it doesn't make sense for me to get the next thing yet. So I'm still holding off. And there's people out there. I mean, there's other channels I watch here on YouTube that they're holding on to the FS7 or the FS5 or, you know, a Canon C300 or Canon C100 Mark II. You know, I see some of those on channels, and they're older cameras, even more old than this, but they're still hanging on to it because they're efficient and it ticks all the boxes that they currently have. So anyways, that's kind of the lesson, if I'm going to make up one and pretend like that was like my grand scheme here. Again, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. I don't know, we'll catch you on the next video whenever that comes out.